Hi, Brad Templeton here from Robocars.com. In order to inaugurate a sort of podcast-style discussion show, I've invited my friend Mario Herger to join me to discuss topics in self-driving, the future of transportation, and electrification. We went on for quite some time, so I've put chapter descriptions in the YouTube description which will let you select just the sections you are interested in. Here we go. Hello, everybody. I'm Brad Templeton from Robocars.com, and as an experiment, I'm going to try doing a podcast-style discussion show about self-driving cars, electric cars, and the future of transportation. I've invited my friend Mario Herger, who has the website and book, The Last Driver's License Holder is Already Born, who writes as well about self-driving car technologies and is fascinated. We're both also Tesla owners, so if we start dissing on Tesla, don't get too upset at us. But I want to go over some of the issues that have sprung up just in the beginning of 2023. It's been a pretty active period already in terms of news and events, and we're going to discuss these things and maybe try and give some insight into what they mean. The first one I want to talk about is something I actually published an article about today, which is the letters that were sent to the California Public Utilities Commission about the operation of Cruise and Waymo in the city of San Francisco. The city of San Francisco doesn't actually have the authority to regulate driving on its streets. That authority goes to the states. They own their sidewalks and other matters. But they're not exactly happy with what Cruise and Waymo have been doing in their cities, both operating vehicles which drive with nobody in them, Cruise only at night and Waymo all day long. There have been some incidents and issues, and so the city wrote letters to the California Public Utilities Commission saying, these guys want to expand their territory and operations. We think we should slow down. We want more transparency. We're worried about the cars that have stalled in the middle of the street. We're worried about a whole raft of issues, and you can go into their letter and see the details. So, Mario, have you looked at these letters and had some thoughts on it?
Yeah, well, I think it's a natural development that these cars become more prominent in the things happen. Yeah, you have incidents. Thank goodness nobody got hurt or got killed even. But of course, it is nasty or annoying if those cars are stopping in the middle of the street, blocking an intersection, or bumping into a bus because they crossed the line, line marker, or something like that. So I think with more of those cars now on the roads, and we heard that Cruise alone has 130 cars driving in the night in San Francisco, and Waymo probably a similar number, then we will see more of those incidents. The thing is, of course, those cars need to drive on public roads. You can't build the perfect airplane by just testing it in the wind tunnel, right? So you can't build a good robocar by just testing it on a test track. You need to have that in the city. And they are doing things that they shouldn't do. But of course, I think when we look at human drivers, they do more of those things that are bad.
Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of press, and now I think there definitely is room for improvement here. But particularly Cruise, the city published a map, and the map showed quite a number of places where Cruise had this happen, only a couple where Waymo had it happen, although Waymo famously got a major artery jammed up during rush hour. And that's a difference. To give credit to Cruise, they're only testing at night, where any mistakes are much less likely to cause any kind of problems with traffic or other issues. They did have an issue with a fire truck, which I also wrote about earlier this week. But what's happened, which has been disappointing, is that both companies in these incidents have not been able to resolve the problem. Now, of course, there are going to be situations that robots don't understand. They're not quite that smart enough yet. But how they're resolving the issue, they're supposed to resolve the issue by bringing in a human remote operator, as they're called, who looks out the cameras of the car, looks at the situation, sees all the data, and makes a decision for the car, not driving it by holding a virtual wheel, but telling it, take this path or turn around. And that's not working. For some reason, they are deciding in these cases to say, we can't resolve the problem with our remote operator. We're going to send a rescue driver, a real physical person is going to try and get through the traffic and get to the car, get behind the wheel and drive it away. And so that's taken, 10 to 15 minutes. I think they have teams of these people around the city. They hope to be able to get to them pretty quickly, although at night that's easy. In rush hour, it's harder. And I've asked Cruise about this. They've said that basically they're taking a very conservative philosophy, which is to say they do want the remote operator to solve the problems, but they're not always confident they can do that 100% right. And because of that, they know that sending a rescue driver is going to be 100% right, if obviously very slow. So the question I think we want to ask as a society is, does that mean they're not ready yet? Or is that just the kind of teething pain that we should tolerate? My general view is if nobody's getting hurt, we accept that student drivers are out there on the roads. They have a little sign on them saying, please be patient, I'm a student driver. They're learning. All we get out of that is one teenager learns how to drive. When the robots learn something, all the robots learn it, and they learn it forever. I hope forever. And so I think we should tolerate these teething pains. The question is, when do they get too much? I mean, is blocking traffic in rush hour, is that too much?
And also in addition to that, what is the right solution for that? You mentioned already, is it a teleoperator that takes over remotely? Or is it you give the car instructions to find out it's the path of the situation? Or do you send somebody physically there, who also might get stuck in this traffic jam that it caused?
Yeah, and they're never going to be worse than a human, though, of course, the rescue driver, other than being slow. Well, so I think their plan, obviously the plan is for the cars to handle as many situations as possible, and for the remote operators to only be involved a little bit. But there are some companies, Cruise and Waymo are not among them, who've actually built remote driving stations where, you can literally have a remote person use, one of those race, simulator game stations with screens and wheels and pedals. And that's okay. But most of these teams have said, we don't want to do that. We want to just give guidance to the car.
But would this work with the current infrastructure that we have, cell phone, broadband, internet, reception in the city? And especially when I look at San Francisco, you have also some skyscrapers in the financial district where the signal may be off. Would we need infrastructure for that?
Well, I believe, I haven't got confirmation from the companies, but that they map the wireless dead zones. And they don't want their car to go somewhere or get stuck somewhere that has a wireless dead zone. They do have these rescue drivers as a potential solution when a car goes if a car did get stuck in a wireless dead zone. But I know you're from Österreich, and there they probably have better cell infrastructure than they do in San Francisco. I don't know. But it's true that American cell dead spots are much more common. But the 5G rollout that's going on should make that happen. And out in the country, our good friend Elon Musk, who I'm sure we'll talk about a couple times today, with his space hat on instead of his car hat on, has actually solved the problem of getting connectivity everywhere you can see the sky.
Yeah. I would also say it's teething pains at the moment. So let's hope that nothing serious happens except of a traffic jam. But that's, I think, why we need to be patient also. And I understand the regulators or the administrators in the city of San Francisco. What they want is, of course, a good situation for everyone, not just the Robocars, right?
Yes.
So of course, they are concerned. That is valid. But let's be patient a bit.
Yeah, I mean, again, these student drivers and even the newly minted drivers who just had a fresh driver's license, they're very risky. They're not very good at it, but we have them on the roads because there's no other way to get safer drivers.
Remember also we had similar discussions, I think, back then when the street scooters were here, and this is e-scooters, and they were laying everywhere around. So they canceled everyone's license and then started fresh with issuing licenses to scooter providers that could show solutions of how not to have them lay over the sidewalks everywhere, right?
The funny thing is that San Francisco, which you think of, hey, Silicon Valley, San Francisco, world capital of technology, it's actually a bit of a Ludditeburg sometimes. I mean, they were one of the only places to ban the Segway. They banned sidewalk delivery robots. I was actually at that council meeting because I work with Starship, one of the sidewalk delivery robot companies that wanted to put its headquarters in San Francisco and decided not to because, hey, not friendly. And now the same thing's going here. All right, let's take a look at a second aspect of this topic, which was in the complaint by San Francisco. So they complained that several times Waymo and Cruise have had someone in the car, a passenger in the car, who has, just not gotten out of the car when it gets to its destination, doesn't respond when you talk to them. And so they've called 911, and so the paramedics have come to the car and found someone just drunk and asleep. Actually, I don't know about the drunk part. I'm just assuming that either they're just a much better sleeper than I am, let's put it that way, or maybe they have been possibly visiting an establishment which sells different substances. So of course, the emergency people are pissed about that. They don't want to be called to wake up somebody who is sitting in a taxi drunk. Now, in a regular Uber, of course, this wouldn't happen because there'd be an Uber driver who could know, hey, buddy, get out of my car, right? And it'd kick him. And once the cars stop, they can't do what I think is the best trick, which is drive really fast and slam the brakes and see if that wakes them up. Because, obviously, you're not going to do that either. This one's not easy to solve. I mean, there's a couple of interesting solutions that I've explored. But it led me to another question, which is that one thing you might want to do to deal with this problem is have a surveillance camera in every car to watch everyone so that you can get a sense, is this somebody who just is drunk and we got to do something about them, like, set off a siren or whatever you're going to do to wake them up? Or do we have to call for emergency response because it's someone who's had a heart attack? And a surveillance camera might help with that, but I'm not comfortable with the idea, since I want to see a world where we move a lot of our travel into robotaxis. And I don't want us to, at the same time, end up creating an Orwellian level of surveillance when we do that.
But they have already surveillance cameras in the car. So when you take a cruise ride, you see at least, I think, 2 cameras inside. And also the Tesla is inside the camera. So there is already potential surveillance possibility, but I think the issue is here that this may not be enough to figure out what's going on with the person. Is this person asleep, or is there really a medical emergency with this person? And I think there may be an opportunity for looking at additional sensors built inside the car, maybe in the fabric, maybe in some other places that measure vital signs of a person to figure out, is this really a medical emergency that's going on here, and also notify already when it's going on, when it's happening. Often time is critical here. Or is this person really sleeping or drunk sleeping in there? And then what to do then? Is it slamming on the brakes the right thing to do, or something else?
You better make sure their seatbelts on before you do that. That way you get to take them to the hospital either way because you killed them. But that would be bad. Never kill a customer, the Monty Python rule. Well, actually, so radar, little small radars, like dollar radars, can actually tell if someone's breathing. And there are cameras that can tell your pulse. So there are ways to do this sort of thing, and maybe that's what they want to look at. But I'm talking about the surveillance camera that is, recording a full video of you. And yes, those cameras are in the cars right now. I don't want them in the production car of the future. I am okay when you were learning and testing, but that sets a precedent that maybe they're there forever. That camera in our Teslas, Tesla actually has a document saying this: we never upload this video up to the cloud. This camera is only feeding our AI software to make sure you're watching the road. And, that makes sense to have a camera for that. But, of course, they could put new software in the car that then captured the video and uploaded it. It's not like physically impossible. I want it to be physically impossible. I actually want a shutter on the camera, which can only be opened in emergencies. Because how are you going to make out with your girlfriend in the back of the car if you're on video camera? It's just going to put a complete damper on that.
Well, you know that the European Union has basically now a regulation that started last year in summer, that you have to have driver monitoring devices in the car. So I was just at the CES I had a test drive with one of these VinFast, these Vietnamese cars, and they demonstrated this gaze detection and driver monitoring, and it was really monitoring not just where my eyes were looking, and then telling me look at the road, but it also looked at, do I have a smartphone in the hands, do I eat something, do I smoke, things like that.
Are you thinking impure thoughts?
Right, I'm
not yet, but eventually it might know. Well, anyway, so yes, I think we're going to have, this is my real point, because we're going to have some need to monitor some aspects of what people do. can we think about it in advance, and can we design so that we don't create the Orwellian level camera that's just got pure video, everything you do, and you have no privacy when you travel? Because today we live in a world where we either drive our own cars and we have privacy there, or we're riding even in we used to ride in cash taxis. And yes, the driver, well, he wasn't looking at us, but he could hear what we were doing. But we just paid cash. There was no record that I had gone from A to B everywhere I went. So listen, we're very quickly building the surveillance state that we don't want. And I just say we want to think about that. And I hope that the teams building this do think about this and think about, how can I solve my problem without gathering more data than I need to solve the problem? Because the instinct of most companies is gather all the data you can, record all the data you can, keep it forever. That's the default instinct. That's the one we have to break.
I think we may here looking at a similar issue like the first problem that we discussed, the letters when the cars stall. Do we need, for example, like supervisors across a city, human supervisors who can access the car quickly and see if there is something happening or something going wrong with the car or with the person in the car? I'm not sure.
I have actually proposed for, not just for these, but also for carrying children, that this is something that should happen already, which is just everyone who is a doctor, emergency worker, paramedic, anyone with the appropriate training, should just have a little app that they run that says, that tracks where they are. It doesn't, again, it's not a surveillance device, it's always reporting where they are. But that if I need medical attention anywhere, right? The classic thing is, someone goes on stage in the play and says, is there a doctor in the house? Is there a doctor on the plane? Well, why don't we have our devices answer that question for us? And we'd say, we need a doctor here. And it would say, oh, there are 3 doctors. We'll ping them on their phones. If they want to help, they'll come. So if someone can run over and deal with you and pay them, and you want a mechanism that would give them cash to incentivize them to do this, although many of them would probably do it, out of goodness. But there's someone who can help probably within 30 seconds of you anytime. And I think this is actually going to be important for children that ride in self-driving cars, because parents will eventually be willing to put children in these on the way to school. Obviously, age 10 and above, that's not too hard, but even 7, 8, 9. And a way to do that would say there's a responsible adult that the car can always get to a responsible adult in 30 seconds. Might have something happen. So,
I think they may be already trying to do something similar like that, because I've taken some rides in the driverless cruises, and what I've noticed is first that they have multiple locations where they launch the cars. So basically across the city there are multiple locations, and the other thing is that I noticed such cars, also cruise cars, but with people in there that then were located or were parking on the side, which is unusual because they're normally not being parked. They're driving around and they're empty. In this case, the engineers were in there and then basically coming quickly to the places where those cars stopped. So this could be, as I said, maybe a way that they operate in the future, having people stationed across the city or across the location and approach the cars within 5 minutes or something like that.
Well, I already advanced to the next topic because we wrote up a whole bunch. It's amazing how much in January there's been to talk about. Consumer Reports did their review of all of the, they called them ADA, and I really hate this name they have picked, and I don't think it's going to stick, but I hope it doesn't stick. But all of the systems like Tesla Autopilot and Blue Cruise and Super Cruise, the systems that will keep the car in the lane on the highway and do sort of supervised driving for you. And the thing that caught a lot of attention when they published this, aside from the stupid name, because the plural of ADA is, aside from it being a woman's name, it's also ADAS, the plural, which is another thing, and it's American Disability. Anyway, enough about the name. The reason people were kind of curious about it is because while Tesla was the pioneer in this field, and everyone has been excited for a long time about Tesla Autopilot, which I've driven with a lot, that they rated Tesla near the bottom in terms of how good their system was. And the criticism I think a lot of people might have on this rating is they use, as Consumer Reports often does, many factors for rating how good a system is, one of which was the performance of the system, how well it handled the car. But there were also, and I don't know how they weighted them, but they seemed to almost rate them equally, which was how much it nagged you if you weren't paying attention to the road, how easy it was to understand what it was doing, and what was the other factor? It was whether you could understand when you could turn it on, right? So that's a fact. So the thing that bothered me about their rankings was that I think people are, well, actually, I don't think very many people are thinking that the nags are a positive feature. I mean, they may say, yes, that should be there, that's important. But Consumer Reports has never downrated a car because it lets you drive faster than the speed limit and do other dangerous things. Quite the reverse. Consumer Reports, like all car magazines, will say, this is a better car because it's more zoom zoom, because it can go faster. I mean, it has more engine power. That we love that in our cars, and consumers want that. And so, as a consumer magazine, that's how they think when they're talking about the speed of the car. But here they're saying, no, we want to downrate it if it doesn't nag you enough. And I'm not saying that's nothing, but I have a feeling what they need to do in these ratings is make the performance of the system 90% of the weight, because I have a feeling from people buying it, they're mostly interested in how well is it going to drive, how pleasant is the driving experience going to be. I don't know if you think the same, or I've argued with the Consumer Reports people about this one before.
Yeah. Well, I keep seeing new features coming in. So, for example, the 2 days ago when I drove a highway again, it told me multiple times that it detected what do you call it, a cheat device on the.
Oh,
on the
you
steering
got
wheel.
the cheat warning. Oh, you bad boy.
I didn't cheat. I didn't even have the hands on the wheel. Nothing there. I was just observing. So I'm not a cheater here. But so this comes in, and I think these were some false positives that it had, and probably that every 15 seconds or so you have to yank the steering wheel to show that you're here. I know that actually from my childhood, not that our cars had that back then. We didn't have a car, but my father was with the railways, and they had a so-called Totmann system. Totmann literally means a dead man.
Yep.
So the engineers on the train had to press like every minute or two a button to show that they're still here. Otherwise, the train would break. So I think that is annoying for a lot of people, and the warnings that it does, or it yells at you. I have the feeling somebody yells at me if I'm not yanking the wheel or holding it. Yeah.
Well, no. I mean, I think everyone believes the system should be there to some degree. Yeah. What was odd was that when they were trying to give you, a consumer's rating about how much do you want to buy this, and they were looking more at public safety issue rather than what consumers think about it. No. So there's been some controversy, of course, about the different styles. Tesla, as you mentioned, requires you to put torque on the wheel. I have a particular style that I use with that, which is I'm always putting torque on the wheel. I put my fingers on the wheel like this. I put my elbow, you can't see here, I put my elbow on the windowsill. And I just constantly, and then I'm think driving. I'm just imagining in my mind what will happen. And then if my hand does what I imagined, all is good. If my hand doesn't do what I imagine, because the car is veering off the road, which it doesn't do too often, but occasionally does, then I take over control, and that seems to be pretty safe. Some people, though, you're right, they sort of like, I better just pull this thing every 20 seconds. Some people, of course, have put on these cheat devices to put constant torque on the wheel, which has gotten Tesla some criticism, and so they've put in this only, by the way, if you have their inaccurately named full self-driving product. I think, do they have this cheat detector warning going on? And there have been a number of people who complained that, it's going after them. But here's a more interesting question. The other companies like Super Cruise, which is General Motors, and Blue Cruise from Ford, and some of the others out there, they don't use wheel detection. They look at your eyes to make sure you're paying attention to the road, not looking at your phone. And they let you take your hands off the wheel and just rest them on your side. And an interesting question. So that's, watching your eyes is important. I think Tesla has learned this. They now do watch your eyes. Watching your eyes is important, but is letting you take your hands off the wheel a good idea for ADAS or not, in terms of how quickly you will respond when you need to do something? And I don't know if we have the answer to that, but I do feel that when your hands are on the wheel and doing this think driving that I do, it's more likely that you're going to be able to quickly respond to a problem. But I don't know if there's science on that.
No, what I've noticed, or I think I've noticed, yeah, and I cannot confirm that, is I think that Tesla is already doing the gaze detection and looking at what you're doing
Oh
while
yeah,
you're on
yeah, they are.
autopilot. Because I have the feeling when I'm, you know, on the highway, no traffic, straight line, and I'm checking my phone, that these reminders to put torque on the steering wheel, to yank it, comes more often.
Well, no, you actually can get a warning saying stop looking at your goddamn phone. It doesn't say it that way, but you will get that. All right, so let's take a look at another topic.
Mhm.
Daimler, they have gotten approval to release their S Class. This is a $121,000 base model S Class, so not every person watching this is probably going to run out and
Mhm.
order one. But it will do. Now I hate the levels. I try to never say them, but it'll do what they will call level 3 in a traffic jam, which is to say, the car will drive itself in a traffic jam under I think 60 kilometers an hour.
About 40 miles per hour.
Yeah, about 40 miles per hour. Well, I'm Canadian, so I'm bilingual. I grew up with English and then switched to metric while I was a teenager. But anyway, yeah. So basically, though, only on the freeway. So you've got to be on a freeway. It's a road that has very high speed limit, 100, 130 kilometers an hour, 60 miles an hour, and but you have to be going much slower than the speed limit, and then it will drive you. Now they only have permission to do this in Nevada right now. They
And in
also
Germany.
and in
In
Germany. Yeah,
Germany.
sorry, in the United States, they just got permission in Nevada, and yes, no, obviously they are German, and
Mhm.
they first applied this in German, and the speed limit on the German autobahn is kind of interesting, and many of them, it's quite an experience to be going 200 on them. Not that I would ever do that, but nonetheless, in a traffic jam, it will let you take your eyes completely off the road, let you watch a movie, read a book. Which is sort of, this is actually Honda released a product that would do this in Japan a few years ago. They only sold 100 of them and they decided not to sell it anymore. Audi got approved to do it as well, but this looks like it might be the first sort of real commercial product where you can not pay attention to the road.
Mhm.
Although, again, in the United States, it would only be of interest to someone who commutes in the Las Vegas rush hour because they're not going to encounter freeway traffic jams in Nevada except in the Las Vegas rush hour. Obviously, they are trying to get it approved for use in California and a lot of other things. And I don't know, maybe you were just in Germany, were you, or in Austria? And maybe you can talk about how people are reacting to it over there.
Well, the Germans think they are basically beating now Tesla and everyone else, and they are kind of the greatest in autonomous driving. Also because they have a law in Germany, a regulation that allows autonomous driving on all public roads if you have the license for that. Yeah. So that's what they think. Well, I would say this Mercedes S-Class in Nevada and in Germany, this traffic jam pilot, so to speak. Shows one thing first, that Mercedes apparently has done all the pains to go through the legal process in those two locations. Yeah, that is, I think, already an achievement in itself. If you know Germany and if you're
Yes, yeah. Germany is very German.
yeah. But I'm not sure if they are looking at the right problem. People keep telling me, yeah, we are doing it step by step. But we know also, both you and me know it from Waymo, back then when they were this Google X project, yeah, that they saw people behaving in a way with level 3 cars that they were so scared and said, you can't expect the driver, to take over and have a complete understanding of the situation, especially when you check mails or read a book or watch the movie. Yeah, so it takes. And Ford has shown that, I think, in the studies, that it sometimes takes up to more than 20 seconds to get a full understanding of the situation. And if the car is to wait 20 seconds, the car can safely handle the situation. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is the right approach to it. It looks for me more like how do we get to the moon? Yeah. Oh, we build a ladder because that's where we see step-by-step progress. Yeah. But you need a new solution, and that's a rocket. And here the same. I think it's the better candle, not the light bulb that everyone else is building.
It is true, and what we found as well is that even when they were employees and under orders not to do so, people still fell asleep in these systems, and you cannot. I mean, you can monitor their eyes and I guess hit the brakes on them, like I said, if they do fall asleep, but it's pretty challenging. But nonetheless, the car companies have pretty much all slowed down their deployment of actual robotaxi self-driving style vehicles, all of them except Tesla, which believes it's number one in that area.
You mean the manufacturers, the OEMs?
Yes,
yeah?
the car OEMs,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah,
They have all been scaling back, including Daimler. But they do believe that ADAS-style tools and something like this traffic jam assist are where they're going to go for the next little while. Mostly they're putting their efforts and their sensors into pure driver assist systems. This is the first one to go a little bit beyond driver assist. I've often wondered with Tesla that because they've been so fully dedicating all their effort to their not very good yet full self-driving system, that they might have been able to pull off something like this, which would actually be deployable and people would use it. Although at first when you think about it, oh, that's nice. In a traffic jam, I'll be able to do my emails. But how much of your life do you really spend in traffic jams? Well, if you can afford a Mercedes S-Class for $120,000, maybe even saving 5 minutes a day is worth the money for you. But I'm not sure this is ever going to be a really exciting product. I think if they can make a product that could fully freeway drive me on my commute or on my drive up to Country House or something like that, where I could, just not pay attention to the road except in a construction zone or special circumstances with lots of warning. I think that's a commercial product people would buy. And of course, I think people argue with me about this, but I think people will buy self-driving cars and robotaxi rides.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I think these are features that really do not have much of a use case. I'm not sure what Mercedes is expecting with that. I mean, there's a second one, and I'm not sure, we talked about that before. This is this parking function, the valet parking in garages that Mercedes...
In Stuttgart you can do, yeah, that's right.
And that is, and I was thinking, why would you spend time on building such a feature? Because this is not what I want. I want to be a bit dropped off at the terminal, not in the garage.
Well,
and then
yes.
again, have to walk there, and then I want to send home the car and not have it in the garage where I have to pay for that. So this is a feature, and then you need smart devices in your garage. It means you need installation, the infrastructure. Who's going to do that? And that's one car, Mercedes S, and how many people really?
I think that's just like a demo, show-off feature, concept feature. Yeah. Obviously, are you going to buy a car? The only thing you can do is park it at the Stuttgart Airport parking lot, that one particular expensive lot. No, I mean, as you say, you're going to want. I think that cars that park themselves, people would like that if it was a more general thing. In fact, I have predicted. In fact, I'm going to do a video about this at some point. That when Robocars and Robotaxis want to park themselves. They're going to do it super cheap because they don't have to park where you're going the way your car has to. Right? The only reason parking costs $10, $15, $20 an hour is because you need to park where you're going. If the vehicle can go half a kilometer and bid out for the cheapest parking and park at the top of the parking lot like a valet does, very densely parked, and leave if the parking gets more expensive. Suddenly the price of parking goes way down, and it's kind of interesting what happens. But that's going to be another video to talk about that. But I think you're right. This is mostly a gimmick product. I don't know if we'll talk about this one too much. I did write about this, but many people will have heard. A guy driving Model S, 2021 Model S on the Bay Bridge in San Francisco Bay Area, which is it's a 5-lane wide bridge that's also an interstate highway. And he said he was in Tesla FSD. He was mistaken about that because the way that system currently works is that it switches to autopilot, the older system, whenever you're on a freeway. But and the full details haven't come out, but his car suddenly decided to both brake and change lanes to the left right in front of someone else. And, well, as we can guess what happens, the other guys behind him hit him, and then the other guy hits the guy behind him, and 8 cars end up smashed up because this Tesla makes this mistake. Many people are wondering, is this something that Tesla drivers all call phantom braking? which we've all experienced, especially in more recently when Tesla took the radar out of their cars. The car, it sees a ghost and it brakes for it. And the ghosts are very happy that this happens because they're never hit. But unfortunately, it can cause something like that. So normally, if you're rear-ended, it's your fault in the vehicle laws. But there's one exception, which is if you've just cut in front of somebody and you jam on the brakes. It is not it's not the guy's. Sorry, when you're rear-ended, it's the other guy's fault. It's not your fault. And this is the one case where it's your fault when you get rear-ended. And that's how the police ruled on this particular case. But the issue that I thought was kind of interesting that I decided to write about was, okay, so they got the phantom braking thing. They obviously should fix it, but they're not fixing it yet. And they probably will never fix it perfectly. So how's the best way to be a supervising driver? Because this guy obviously did not clue in. The normal thing you're supposed to do if your Tesla autopilot makes a mistake, you're supposed to grab the wheel, hit the pedals, and drive. And Tesla keeps saying anytime anything crashes, it's never Tesla's fault. Mm-hmm. It's always the fault of the driver because that's the rules. And, in spite of the name autopilot and other things, they actually make these rules very clear to you. And when you buy it, when you activate it, they make it very clear to you that it's your job to sometimes intervene for that car. And if you don't do that, you are going to have a crash, as we saw with this guy. Mm-hmm. So how do you, because I was thinking to myself, I'm pretty good at grabbing the wheel when the car tries to drive into the guardrail or do anything else of that sort or gets too close to another car. Mm-hmm. But one thing I'm not instinctive about is, hitting the pedal. Because that's not your usual emergency response is, I got to accelerate because my car is braking for no reason whatsoever. Would you think you could have been hitting this crash, or would you have survived?
Probably also not. I mean, of course, I have my foot always somewhere over a pedal, even if I...
Oh, you're better than me.
Pilot or so, but the question is, would I have it over the accelerator or over the brake pedal? Yeah. When I'm following the situation, I'm trying to switch between that stuff, yeah. But in this case, it also brakes so quickly that I think you don't have a chance. What's really going on? I think for me, it's a sign also that we need to look more also how to do forensic analysis of such a situation, especially from a regulator perspective. Yeah, what really happened there. And I guess regulators car companies need to have a data standard or something like that, so that a regulator can download this data, put it in the systems, test it, and make better test cases. Maybe also require them before they license something like this. This is for me the larger message here. Every one of us who has autopilot has experienced phantom braking. Sometimes quicker deceleration, sometimes slower, and there was nothing, and sometimes you realize, there was really something.
Yeah, I mean, some people are bothered by it a lot. Some people get it a lot more than others, and some people are bothered by it a lot more.
Yeah, that's another thing, Some people really get it more. I don't have that often, but I hear from some people who complain constantly about that.
Yeah, I mean, my girlfriend, when first time she got it, she said, she stopped using autopilot for a while. She said, because this was quite jarring. Anyway, I've got a lot more about that you can find through my website. Let's look at another topic. Oh, yeah. Well, geez, I think the one we can go on for too long about. But just as some background, for a long time, every quarter, Tesla would publish some numbers claiming how wonderfully safe they were. And they said that Teslas drive, 4 million miles between crashes with autopilot on. They drive 1 million, 2 million, whatever the number is. And also, police say that there's a crash every 500,000 miles for ordinary other cars. And they use these numbers to go out and say, well, look at us. We're so wonderfully safe. Autopilot is so wonderfully safe, and you should all love it. Now, they stopped publishing the numbers a year ago, and I had hoped it was because I and many others had complained to them about these numbers are a lie. But no, they'd published them again just a few weeks ago. They now published the numbers for most of the quarters of last year all at once. And they're getting repeated again by people. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of things about these numbers that I wanted to point out to people. The first one is this Tesla measures not crashes, but airbag deployments. They get a signal from the car when the airbags are triggered. And so they're saying we go this many miles between car crashes where the airbag goes on. But the police are just reporting every crash they see. And airbag does not go off in every crash that the police go on. So you really can't compare the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest fault in the numbers is that, and there's some research that's been done about how people use Tesla Autopilot, and it found that autopilot is used, no giant surprise, about 95% on freeways. And the Tesla manual says that's where you're supposed to use it. You're not really supposed to use it on your ordinary streets. Some people do. Now, it turns out that the number of crashes per mile on freeways is a third, or at least the number of fatalities. It's hard to get data on the number of crashes. Is about a third of the number on regular streets, and that's even with the faster speed. And that's because of two reasons. The freeway is easier to drive, so people make fewer mistakes, and you're also going more miles per hour, because I think the rate of human crashes is better measured per hour of driving and not per mile of driving. It's just naturally less on the freeway because every hour of driving takes you 3-4 times as far as hours of city driving, where the average speed is 12 miles an hour or something in a city. So because of this, of course, it has a better record for freeway driving than it does. It would be very surprising if it wasn't better, but unfortunately, they interpret this other way. So why do I really fault them on this? I have a degree in mathematics. I very rarely use it. Just show it to immigration officials every so often to make them think I know something about something. But anyone who's studied mathematics or science or statistics or a lot of other fields knows that when you're trying to answer a question like, is this safer than that, or does this happen more often than that, you try and control for any other variable, because every other factor will introduce bias, like the fact that autopilot is mostly on highways introduces natural bias. And this is not a secret. You get taught this. Anyone with any training fully knows that you try and compare as much as possible apples to apples, and you try and factor out everything else. And now, the reason that a lot of research you see is flawed is because that's hard to do. You cannot just eliminate other biasing factors so easily. It takes work, and then people don't like to do work. It's the main reason. Sometimes it's impossible to actually separate out the factors. But not for Tesla. Tesla's got all the data. They know exactly where each crash was, what road it was on, what type of road it was on, what type of person was driving, how fast they were going. They have all that data. It's trivial for them to control for all the biasing factors. And so they have just no excuse to not do that. So much of no excuse that I can only say, especially since it's been pointed out many times, that I think they're kind of trying to fool us.
I mean, first I want to give a certain credit to Tesla, namely that they even go the length and publish this kind of data. I'm not really aware of other companies doing that. But then, of course, if you don't publish the complete data set that you based it on, you have a problem. You should, I think, always hand it over to some independent organization. It could be a university, could be, I don't know, a company that uses the data, even basically gets on the same baseline with other data that they have, and then makes an analysis of that. And we know from, for example, the autonomous driving data that the companies in California have to share with the DMV, the disengagement report that's coming out, that they have a lot of leeway of what is it, disengagement, right? So and then also I think what we have to be careful as well is, beside all that what you mentioned, is that people are jumping on the things that are happening, but not looking really at the stuff that's not happening. It's like in crime or terror attacks. If you tell them you prevented crime, nobody believes you that because nobody saw it. But if something happens, then it's your fault. You're being blamed. But that you prevented 10 others from happening, nobody sees that. Nobody congratulates you on that. And here the same. Everyone sees the accident, a video like the pileup on the Bay Bridge, but nobody sees the ones where it prevented an accident and serious injuries. So there's a long way to go. I think we'll be learning from that. But I think with those cars being more and more these computers, we will see much more data coming out of the different manufacturers and then probably coming on the same baseline that we can compare them to each other.
Well, I agree with you about the bias we have, and we pay attention to the crashes. And right now we've been having flooding where I live, and people are calling me saying, "Isn't it completely flooded everywhere?" I said, "No, but cameras go where there's a flood, and
Yeah,
makes you
right.
But I can't give a lot of credit, a lot of benefit of the doubt to Tesla on this one, because I think they publish these numbers because they make them look very good, and they get to say, "Look how safe we are." And I don't think it's because of a desire for transparency, and in particular the fact that they include a number of police crashes for other cars and airbag crashes for Teslas. I think they could go and get the airbag numbers for other cars. Actually, it's a little hard to find. I looked for it, I didn't find it right away. Anyway, I've just recently been seeing these numbers keep getting cited, and in spite of the fact that I think I and many other people have debunked them pretty
Well,
well.
let's talk about marketing budget for Tesla. Yeah, this always says on $0. I think the marketing
True.
money goes into these studies.
You could be right. All right. Well, one little fun topic that Waymo, which operates in Phoenix, downtown Phoenix, and also in Chandler, Arizona, which is a suburb of Phoenix, has announced that they're doing a little promotion for the Super Bowl. So the Super Bowl, which is coming up, and this is of course, for you Europeans watching this, it's the World Cup of American sports. In the game, the Americans call football, and it's a very big deal. Actually, I know people do see it, and I hold a party most years, not during the virus, where we watch the commercials. We don't care about the sport. But anyway, it's being played in Phoenix next week, and it's being played in a stadium that's not in Waymo's service area. But Waymo is sort of just telling people, hey, you may not have realized you can ride a robotaxi, at least in the other areas of Phoenix, and that's fun. But this led me to ask a more interesting question, which is, how do you, if they did serve the stadium, how do you empty a stadium of 60,000 fans with robotaxis? And it's not an easy problem. Now, admittedly, in a town like Phoenix, there's no public transit to the Europeans again are going to think I'm crazy when I say this. There's no public transit to their giant stadium. I mean, almost none. I think if you really want to take a very long route, you can get there. And so the stadium is surrounded, of course, with big giant parking lots. And so fans are going to park their cars in those lots. They're going to drive out. However, it's going to be each person with their own individual car. Robotaxi fleets are designed so you only have maybe 1/4 the number of robotaxis for the number of customers that you have, because obviously they're taxis serving many different people during the day. So how do you get the stadium empty with your Waymos?
So how many people are there in the stadium?
I don't remember the capacity of that
60,000?
stadium, but typically 50, 60,000 for these
56,000?
American football
So
stadiums.
imagine you can take like 3-4 people in a car. Yeah, not in the Waymo. So I think it's 3 or 4 maximum. If these are
Actually, the Waymos in Chandler, they still have, I think, their Pacifica
minivans.
minivans, which can hold more people. And also, they don't let anybody sit in the driver's seat of these vehicles. They now do let people sit in the passenger seat. A future robotaxi could have more seats per square meter.
Yeah. Well, the Geely, the Seeker Geely vehicle that they had showcased at the CES, I think has space for 5 people, if I'm remembering that correctly. Also, the Zoox robotaxi has 4. The Cruise Origin, I think also 4 probably.
Is it just 4? I thought they could get 6 in that guy. It's a pretty big guy, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah. So imagine now to get out 40,000 people. Let's make it simple. So it means you need 10,000 cars. If each car goes only one route, or one time.
No, but those people are not all the same family.
They're not all the same value. So that's a complication. So you need probably more. You have 2 people or 3 people in the car, in the vehicle. Yeah, and let's say each car could service two rides. Potentially, then you get a number of how many cars you would need in order to empty out the stadium. There's probably 5 to 10,000 vehicles.
And also, I mean, the regular life in the town is going on, and people need the vehicles.
Right.
There was getting people to the stadium is actually easier because people don't arrive at the same time going to. But in many cases, after a game, they all want to leave around the same time, and so that's I think the Super Bowl is a bit different. It's more of a it's a giant party going on there, so you spread people out. So I think the answer is this is where we'll start seeing robotic transit as well as robotic cars. And so, if you put buses, they could be human driven or robots, and those buses, and you have a lot of them, and they take people in all the directions. So they take them north, south, east, west to parking lots where you then have 500 Waymos waiting to take people that last pit, or even smaller vehicles. I think that's what we're going to end up doing. Well, that's we can go on about that for a while. I've put too many topics down here, but we recently saw two different articles. One from some academics at the University of California in Davis. Nice people, I'm sure, but not necessarily groundbreaking that they wanted to write about this, but also from Gil Pratt, the chief scientist of Toyota Motor, which is, of course, the world's largest car company. And Toyota, of course, is famously not the leader in electric cars. They were, by a long margin, the leader in hybrid cars. The Prius changed the world, for sure, and all props to the Prius. And Gil was basically saying, as he's also that, hey, we're going to need a lot of lithium if we want to make all our cars electric. And that's going to be really hard. So the Toyota approach of hybrids is much better because you can put less lithium in each car for plug-in hybrids in this case, not ordinary Prius, but the plug-in Prius and plug-in RAV4 that they make. You can put a much smaller amount of battery in each of those cars, still have almost all the driving around town be electric, and have gasoline for when you go outside of town. And that this is a much greener solution, in fact, Gil argued, because we're going to make more of the miles electric if we do it this way. Yes, each car will drive some gasoline miles, but the overall, because we can now do all the cars with less lithium, it's a win. The researchers at UC Davis, they also took this extrapolation. Let's imagine that batteries look exactly as they do in 2023. Let's imagine the cars look exactly as they do in 2023. And let's play that out of them all converting over to being lithium batteries. And it's going to need a crap load of lithium, and that's going to be really hard to get, and it's also going to be very environmentally destructive to mine it. Now, I don't think that's true. I think that we are remarkably good at figuring out new solutions. When I've written an article saying that people misunderstand the law of supply and demand, because they are taught in the first class they ever take in economics, they're taught the law of supply and demand, which is demand for something goes up, and then the price goes up because we can't meet the supply. But the real law is the reverse. The demand for something up and the price goes down. And that's true of all technological things, including car batteries. Car batteries have seen massive increase in demand over the last few decades, and we've seen massive falling in price. The same is true for solar panels, and of course the greatest example in history, the transistor, which literally costs 1/trillionth of what it did when people were first trying to make computers. So as the demand for transistors and computing went up, the price dropped by a factor of 1 trillion. Now, it's not always going to be that good, but even natural gas went down in price as the demand went up, as people discovered new fracking approaches. So this can even apply to natural resources. So anyone who predicts, oh my God, we're all going to run out of things and we're not going to be able to pull off what we need to pull off, they've almost always been wrong in history. I can't say never, never, ever wrong, but it's the way to bet. Yeah. But what about Toyota's proposition that because lithium is expensive right now, we should all just buy plug-in hybrids and not electric cars? What do you think?
So first, here's a shout out on the book Superabundance.
Oh, okay, there you go. Got to plug your book.
The studies that you just mentioned, there's a famous wager from the 80s where an economist went and bet that he thinks that the prices for 5 different metals, copper, nickel, tin, and some others will be going down in 10 years. And while the others all said, no, it's going up. And he famously won, it was 1/5 of the price when they started. Yeah. So the thing is, scarcity is not material. Scarcity is ideas, and humans. But we always, when the prices go up for lithium, we will always find ways to get either more lithium, the deposits, there are more than enough deposits. They're just not mineable at the moment, so we have not made mines, but with the prices going up, suddenly they become economically to make them explorable. Or we found alternatives or use less of those things. And that led I mean, when you think about it, 200 years ago, yeah, we had humans basically on subsistence. Most of humans were basically working 7 hours a day, 7 hours a day just to be able to afford the food of the day. Today we are working in minutes to have the entire food, and we are way more people living much longer, having a much more wealth and health in that thing. That means humans are able to overcome that.
We're agreeing too much. I should
Yeah,
have been. I was
yeah,
afraid of that because yes, and what I've written in particular that's not well understood is that oil is not the good, or even lithium is not what we want. Right? We want affordable, effective, clean transportation.
right, right.
That's the actual good. In the middle of that, you could say batteries or electrical
Yeah,
storage. Storage technology is what we want. And so even if the natural
yeah,
resource, and there are a few natural resources and a few things out there which are harder to make abundant, but usually that's not the thing we actually want. The thing we want is at first simply batteries, but for storage or transportation. And the world has shown that if we really want something, we figure out how to make it cheap. And so the more demand, if you learn supply and demand in economic school,
yeah,
put that out of your mind, because
yeah.
that only happens for a very short time. Even when you get a crazy war in Europe that suddenly raises the price of things, the net result of that war is going to be that Europe figures out to stop buying oil and gas from Russia, stop burning oil and gas as much as they did. And in the end, the price of energy will go down, not up, even though Putin can benefit a little bit from it going up in the
You
short term.
know, they did. Germany had like 50% of its oil and gas coming from Russia at the beginning of last year. Today
Yeah.
it's zero. So
Well,
if you want, we can. Yeah. Now,
now the
coming back
Germans
to,
are crazy and
yeah,
have decided to shut down all their nuclear reactors, but that's another long story which we could do another day.
but coming back to Toyota, yeah, I mean, there's a good reason why they are trying to do that, and that is they are being hit by disruption. They had their first mover advantage with the plug-in hybrids, Prius, Toyota Prius, and so on. But then they stalled, and now they see basically a disruption coming at them, and that requires some hard cuts. So what is a hybrid? A hybrid is basically you have still a combustion engine and you have a battery. So that means you have more people working on that. You have a more complex solution, so it's good for the company itself, not so good for the customers because the customers buy a more expensive and potentially um, breakable system, yeah, that has to be maintained. So, and what the switch to electric vehicles would mean that across the industry is estimated about a third of the people that you today have working in combustion engine cars, building the combustion engine, the transmission, the gasoline fuel system, the exhaust system. That out of those one third of the people who are doing that, you need only 10%. And
Yeah.
that is hard cut. That means with Toyota having 200,000 plus employees, it would mean a third of them would become superfluous. Yeah, Volkswagen with over 600,000 people, only like 200,000 people that you would not need if you simply calculate it like this. And this is where you see the resistance in these companies because as a CEO, you can't just lay off a third of your people in such big companies. There's a lot of political repercussions and shareholders. And I think this reality is something that especially Toyota uh, has tried to talk away.
Yeah.
And now they had to basically, I'm not sure that Toyota, what is it, grandson or something like that, was the
Well,
CEO,
he's resigning, and they're going to
yeah,
have a new
resigned
CEO.
voluntarily, yeah, or he basically
Oh,
was told. I'm not sure if this was really so voluntarily because they've seen the numbers probably going down everywhere.
yeah. Many people are speculating that when the new CEO takes over, we're going to see a major change in direction from
Yeah,
the company.
yeah,
And as you were saying, they'd better make a major change in direction.
yeah.
There's one hybrid design I think is kind of interesting, which is the design that it was in the BMW i3. The folks from Bayern had an electric car with a small, very small gasoline engine, a motorcycle engine, that was tuned to only operate at exactly one speed. So it's much easier and simpler to do it. And it was not a parallel hybrid, but a serial one, so it could only charge the battery. When they sold it in the United States, the law made them use it in a very stupid way. But the European configuration, which, by the way, people found out how to hack and convince the car it was in Europe, and so it could drive properly, might make some sense, because right now we're seeing a lot of people I want a giant battery that'll do 350 miles in my car, and you actually don't need that. And one thing that might make some sense is a car that can go 150 miles, but you can slot in this gasoline generator for those few times a year that you want to go far from the charging grid. You want to go up in the hills, the mountains, or just not worry. I could see that as a reasonable approach. That engine's inexpensive. It's still got emissions, of course, but you could even be a Stirling engine, which is actually even more efficient. No one's ever tried that. So, but the BMW was actually, a lot of people were saying, hey, this was one of the nicer electric cars out there, because it was a BMW and they know how to make a nice car. But pretty soon it was the same price as the Tesla, and it had like 90 miles of electric range, and nobody wanted it. So I don't even
It was
know.
also an unloved child at BMW.
Yeah, it's true.
That's why they also manufactured it far off from the headquarters, far off in German distances, not in Munich or around there, but in Leipzig, which is former Eastern Germany, far, far away, a different world. And let them do that. It was kind of a SWAT team. The i3 was a fantastic car. I mean, there was so much innovation that went in. When you look at it, Sandy Munro made a complete analysis of that vehicle, but people had issues, I think, with the design. It
had the suicide doors, and it was kind of small and Spartan for a Beamer.
And the true BMW folks in Munich, they just hated it.
Yeah. But one interesting, and I mean, they didn't invent that idea, but they were the first car company to sort of make a serious play at it. I mean, I've even proposed battery swap is something that's a pretty silly idea, and it's been tried and failed before, and there are people trying again. But actually, the technology behind battery swap as not swapping your whole battery, but the ability to temporarily swap in a larger battery in a space could actually make sense, because right now we're all driving around town carrying these 70, 80 kilowatt hour batteries, which we don't need to, and there's a lot of weight carried around for no reason, a lot of money spent for no reason. This also would help if we ever really were going to have a shortage of lithium, but we already showed why we're not really going to worry about the shortage of lithium. Another paper that I had to debunk this month came from a grad student at MIT, but because of MIT, it's gotten a lot of attention and people paying attention. And what she wrote was that, the self-driving software, especially the neural networks, very compute intensive, very energy intensive, using a lot of watts. And she made the assumption that some cars are indeed using about 800 watts to drive their self-driving AI accelerators today, which is a lot. Now, your car is using about 15 kilowatts to drive on the highway, for example, so it's still a small portion of what an electric car is using for driving. It's using less when it's driving in the city, obviously, because it takes less energy to drive there. But anyway, so she said, well, then what happens if we just extrapolate this out, and the 800 watts is going to grow and become kilowatts and kilowatts and kilowatts more, and even though the processors are more efficient in 2050, we're still going to see immense amounts of power. So she did a calculation. Let's make every car autonomous, every car drawing 3 or 4 kilowatts while it's going. Oh my God, that's more electricity than all the computer centers in the world today, more compute than that, more electricity than some countries, as people love to say about Bitcoin mining. And so there were 2 ways this was wrong, which was, the first one was, that's wrong. That's not how you extrapolate. It's not going to be burning 5 kilowatts in all these cars, and we're not going to, we are going to gain more efficiencies, and the neural networks are going to get better, and the sensors are getting better. And just as we have in computation not only made our computing vastly cheaper, we've actually made it get much more per watt. And that's factored in the paper, but not correctly. But there's another factor which is less understood about self-driving cars. Self-driving cars are also self-charging cars, which means to say they can go off to the charging when it's time for them to charge, if they're electric. They can't plug themselves in quite yet, although there are a few companies that have made prototype robotic charging plugs. And I think we eventually actually will develop yet another charging plug standard. We have so many today, but that doesn't mean we can't have more, which is designed for the cars to plug themselves in with, just because the car is a robot, and so you don't need any other robotics if you do it right. But whether that'll happen or not, I don't know. But cars are going to charge themselves. If nothing else, they'll drive to a charging lot, and they'll be, just like there used to be at gas stations, a dude or a woman who is going to plug you in, but they're doing it like just plugging in all day, and so it's relatively cost effective. All right, so the cars charge when they want to, because unless you're a fleet car that's driving 200 miles a day, you don't need to charge every day. You can pick when you charge. So the power grid has all sorts of sources on it, which have different amounts of emissions. And we have our fossil fuel plants, like our coal plants and natural gas plants, that have a lot of emissions. And we have our nuclear plants, our solar farms, wind farms, and various other forces which have no emissions, or different levels of emissions. Hydro, of course, as well is in there. And energy storage will be in there too. But the nice thing about cars is, and it's a problem that everyone complains about solar power only during the day. Not entirely surprising, only when it's sunny. And that's the biggest problem with solar power. Solar power is cheap, it's clean, it's wonderful in every possible way, except for the fact that it only happens when it's sunny, and you want power when you want it, not when it's sunny. But self-driving cars aren't like that. Self-driving cars will take power when you tell them, I have it for you cheap. If you send a message to the self-driving car, hey, extra solar power available now because there's lots of sun and nobody's running the air conditioner, I'll sell you power for a really low price because I got to sell it to somebody. Solar power, that's the other problem with solar power. If you don't sell it, it's gone. You might as well sell it for a penny or half a penny if you'll get that for it. And so you get this magical marriage where the power plants send a message out to the cars saying, we got cheap power. The wind plants say we got cheap power. The nuclear plants, which when they're running at night, they don't have too many people buying their power. And with a nuclear plant, you don't really turn it up and down. It's always on. And they're going to send a message out, cheap power for you. And the cars are going to say, great. They're going to drive off if they're not in use, if they're just parked. They'll drive off, plug in, charge up. And all the power that's surplus, the nuclear, the wind, the solar, happens to be the power with no emissions. Mm-hmm. So, in fact, while we're still maybe going to be burning all kinds of coal and evil coal plants for running our air conditioners and running our factories, the cars aren't going to take any of that coal power. Because that's expensive power. Power at 3 in the afternoon, when everybody wants it, super expensive. Never charge your car then. Anyone with an electric car knows. Never charge your car if you pay the time price of power. Never charge it then.
So I agree with you, and there is even more to that. First, autonomous vehicles are now mostly becoming electric, and in California, the governor signed, I think already 1.5 years ago, a law that starting 2030, all autonomous vehicles have to be zero emission. Yeah, so this is first one thing. That means I can have an electric vehicle, for example, that may start out with a energy mix that may have fossil fuels in there as well, but slowly or quicker can move over to photovoltaic, sustainable energy sources. Yeah. That is not happening with, of course, a combustion engine car. The other one is we must not forget that autonomous vehicles can drive completely differently than humans. That means more sustainable. They don't have to, they drive smoother. They don't accelerate in the way a human would do. Yeah, we could, for example, have the cars drive through intersections without having traffic signals, basically coordinating.
Yeah, that's not happening for a long time, if ever.
Oh, well, rockets landing. Anyways, that means those cars could drive in more sustainable ways because they are computers that can optimize that. And then the other one is, if you think of that, how many crashes we have every year, collisions in the US. I think there's a number of about 10 to 12 million collisions with 40,000 people dying and over 1 million being injured. That means also that there's a carbon footprint for all the damage that it create. If we achieve the goal that we can reduce that with autonomous vehicles, let's say 90% of those we avoid, then we have here a lot of energy, a lot of carbon footprint reduced that today humans would generate simply because they are not paying attention.
Yeah. So, the thing that makes me want to talk about this, because I think most of these papers, both the lithium paper and this paper on emissions, were not very well done, is that there are people who have political views on electric cars and self-driving cars. And so when a paper comes from MIT, UC Davis, whatever, saying some talking point like, self-driving cars are going to cause huge emissions and are going to emit tons of greenhouse gases, everybody, even if the paper were correct, by the way, and this one isn't, but even if we're correct, people will just take that headline and suddenly you've got all these people saying, oh, yeah, well, but I heard that self-driving cars are going to cause more emissions than 300 coal plants. And, it ain't true. And unfortunately, I don't want to discourage anyone from doing research they believe is true. I think they should, and I think we should challenge any assumption, always challenge the science. Yeah. But you want to take some care that the way you express this, because you're going to become a talking point for people who are not up to any good. Let's put it that way.
So I actually felt compelled to create a special section on my own website, on my own blog. It's called Myths.
Yeah,
so looking at the carbon footprint of electric vehicles versus other propulsion systems, battery life cycles, recycling of those, hydrogen, and then autonomous vehicles. There's another one coming now, so maybe this is something to put in there.
I've considered doing a video series, yes, I think Mythbusters would be a good name for it or something, but maybe that's taken. But there's definitely enough of them. You could do one season of a show like that. Every company in the transportation business and every high-tech company has done a lot of layoffs recently. And people are getting scared, and they should be. We definitely have an economic downturn. We're definitely in the trough of disillusionment in self-driving cars. But one thing that surprised me was that even Waymo, which has been pretty immune from layoffs, did have some layoffs recently. And the press said, Waymo didn't actually announce the details, but based on people on Blind and so on, that a number of the layoffs were at the trucking part of Waymo Via, which is surprising because if you look at another company, Aurora, which was founded by Chris Urmson, who was the person who was the lead of Waymo for all of its early life, they made a reverse decision. They originally were going to be about self-driving cars, and then they said, no, we're all about trucks. Now they say they're still about cars, but definitely everything you hear from them these days is about their trucks. And so it was interesting to see Waymo potentially going in the other direction. They've been interested in both trucks and cars. And yesterday I actually had an interview, which I'll be writing about, with the head of the Swedish company Enride, which is making electric, autonomous and remotely driven trucks.
And Linnea. Mm-hmm.
And they have a very different philosophy from Waymo Via and the other truck companies. They don't want to do long-haul trucking. They think long-haul trucking is, not useless. It's not the market they want to be in, and it's not the best and biggest market. And I was starting to wonder, is Waymo thinking the same way about long-haul trucking? Because many people have been attracted by trucking because it seems like it's something you can pull off sooner. It seems like, it's sort of a well-defined problem with clearly delineated commercial customers who will pay you money. There's not as much debate about whether or not there's a business in long-haul trucking that there is in robotaxi. Because after all, Uber in the non-robotaxi business is still not a profitable company. But what do you think? Is Waymo rethinking that, or is it just they decided we have to pick one?
I have the feeling when I look at these layoffs, this is all kind of internal politics, maybe pressure from investors to basically follow suit with the thing, and it doesn't spare apparently something like Waymo Via. And I understand also why Waymo may be affected, because if you look at the numbers of how much they spent in the past decade since they started doing that, on average, I think they spend about $2 to $3 billion a year on developing the technology. And with revenues of we're talking about less than $1 million or so per year, that they felt probably the pressure to do that, not because they don't believe in it, but the pressure became just too large with everyone laying off people here. And also given maybe looking at it, having in the past 2 or 3 years during the pandemic hired a lot of people because suddenly everyone went online. Companies such as Apple and Facebook hired immensely. I mean, Facebook, 55,000 people in just 2 years or something like that. Yeah, and laying off now again 12,000 people at Facebook means we are back at this date from March 2022 of the hiring. Yeah, so I think everyone felt the pressure, also from investors, from shareholders, from others, and there may be a CEO that is not a founder, maybe more under pressure to do that and cannot resist or object against that than a founder. So I would potentially put it into that category.
Well, Waymo, of course, doesn't really have investors the way most of the people. Google has investors, and there have been some Google investors who have been saying, hey, you're spending too much on Waymo in general. Yeah. But of course, Google is still entirely controlled by its founders because of the stock structure they have. And so what happens there, they're no longer involved day to day, but what happens there, it has to be in line with what they want. And Larry Page, who is really in many ways the most responsible person for the rise of the self-driving car in this century, he believes in them, and he's willing to invest a lot of money to make it happen. So it could be that trucking was... was not, I don't know what Larry's view on trucking was, never talked about that, but it could be something as simple as that. But anyway, it's one of the first signs of scaling back at a company which is funded by the visionary billionaire. And of course, there's a lot of people are dumping on billionaires in the last few years. I think visionary billionaires do a lot for society, even though they do some bad things.
Let me maybe also extrapolate a little bit on that. When I look, especially, German car manufacturers or other car manufacturers that were founded about 100 years ago or older, and where families are not anymore, or the founders are not anymore in there. Yeah, just think about Volkswagen. When Google started their project in 2009. That's been now 14 years doing autonomous vehicle development without much to show for in regards to revenue. Yeah. At the same time, Volkswagen had five CEOs. So there were multiple crises in between and good times, but for each of those CEOs, it basically meant $2 to $3 billion spending on that. That's basically taking that money that flows out that may come back in 10 years when I'm long retired, when I'm long not a CEO anymore. So why should I do that? Yeah. And
I can't imagine why would Volkswagen have had changes of CEOs. Did anything happen recently to them?
It's a slaughterhouse inside. Yeah.
Well, I've consulted for two automotive CEOs, Carlos Ghosn of Nissan and Rupert Stadler of Audi. And they're both now under indictment. So I don't know if I'm going to get any more clients.
It's you. It must be you.
Don't listen to me.
Here you go.
Pretty crazy stories in both cases.
No, it is a very political abyss hellhole. Those things, because also of owner structures, let's say at Volkswagen or even at Nissan. The Japanese and the French, and they're all clashing here. So it is not very easy for a CEO, as smart as you may be, but you are being set up basically in an incentive system and with pressures from outside that make it impossible for you to survive longer than you want to.
All right. Well, we've made this show way too long, and this part you could talk about more than I will because you went. I decided not to go to this year's COVID exposure show. But I must say that looking from afar, I wasn't too much in regret. There were some things I definitely would have liked to see that were on display. But as far as self-driving announcements of significance, I didn't see a lot. The ZF did something with a whole bunch of shuttles. They're going to build really large volumes of autonomous shuttles. So I thought that was interesting. But other than that, what was there that was the surprise announcement? Oh, the world's changed.
Well, I've been at the last 4, I think, CES. So last year the one, this year the one, and the two before the pandemic.
No, I was at the ones before the virus, but
yeah. So last year it was disappointing insofar because like 2 weeks before that, 30% of the automotive manufacturers just canceled. Even Samsung canceled. And they always have a nice show at the CES this year there was a lot going on, but you're right. What you've seen was on the one side the Waymo history vehicles plus the truck and the new one.
Yep.
That was nice to see and to sit in there. And I had the I had the luck to be exactly at the same time there when the Geely CEO was there.
All right.
So
Hopefully he's seen the car
so I
before.
was I was sitting in there, sneaking with this delegation into the car and out of the car. And when they finally figured out that I'm not part of the delegation, I had already all the pictures and videos.
Yeah, yeah. Who let this Austrian in here?
Yeah, I was definitely not looking Asian, even if I have smaller eyes, but
Yeah.
I was not looking like that. I saw also demos that WeRide did, so they let you hop on in a demo track or on the road. So I did the one on the demo track. There was the Zoox Robotaxi there. It was nice to see it live, looking at it, sitting in there, having it explained to us. Then there were the people mover that like ZF had, and some other companies. This one others had more concepts, Pininfarina and Sony. I think was it Sony?
Oh, yeah. Sony had
Some,
some crazy concept. But the ZF shuttle, that's a real thing they're saying they're making a lot of, right?
yeah. So the ZF thing looked really, like you would expect to be a bus looking like to the inside, with some cute ideas like a charger for your phone that you put there, but everything felt like a real bus, just not with a driver anymore. So that looks good. But you're right, there were not really big announcements of self-driving. What was the same again is that you had the big OEMs being there, and showcasing stuff where I just question their sanity. Yeah, everyone shows self-driving cars or even taxis people with them from the hotels to the conference center, but they show. Mercedes was talking about the garage parking, yeah, the valet parking, and BMW, you could do some test rides with their electric vehicles that they had. But I'm not expecting much anymore from them there. It's always kind of you have the feelings are two different worlds, yeah.
Yeah.
And you're asking why actually are they at the CES?
I mean, it's become the big automotive show and self-driving show. I'm sure there were several hundred LiDAR companies there. There seem to always be, not
Mhm.
all of which will survive. But all right. Do you want to talk about more Tesla stuff, or shall we maybe wrap it up? And
We can wrap it up. I think well, I think we
we've
made
gone pretty long, and
yeah, we don't want
maybe
to exhaust our
do
audience here, I
fewer
guess.
topics.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
And
assuming nobody is
that's
still
for the next.
watching at this point. What I'll be doing is in YouTube, I'll be putting I should say this at the beginning, of course, but I'll be putting in those chapter markers so that people can just listen to the issues that they're interested in. And of course, there'll also be the transcript that YouTube automatically puts forward. So I think we'll keep doing this unless nobody watches, and or with different guests, and maybe even letting people come in, and maybe with fewer topics. Originally, I thought about doing this. I was going to say, just a week's worth of topics, but we've ended
No,
up with a month.
I thought right away that you have a very challenging agenda created here.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
I will remove the agenda from the screen and just say that it's been a fun over an hour,
Thank you.
almost an hour and a half, and lots of great issues, and there are more to come. So. As always, come to this channel for the latest on both the future of transportation with self-driving and electrification. And you can visit Mario's website, the last driver's license holder. Is it .com? Is it the whole?
.com, yeah.
.com. Where he also opines on these topics. And he also does a fair bit of coverage of the European scene, which even though he has been seduced over to the United States, he's still very much in touch with what's going on, especially in the German-speaking world. So I will look forward to seeing you again, and maybe even some viewers as guests in the near future. I'm Brad Templeton from Robocars.com.